Okay, so just to sort of review some of the innovative digital strategies that have been implemented since the lockdown. We have our education team with the head of education, Lisa Phillips, also Jennifer again, working on education programs that can be delivered online, so as webinars. And there's also been refining the website so that teaching resources can be optimised. And I've got a slide for our virtual museum, which was just launched in the last couple of days, and it is truly wonderful for a number of reasons. So one of our volunteer guides, Simon Schwartz, did all the photography for it. So this is you can see the different formats that are being offered online. And if you go to the next slide, Victoria, there's the virtual tour, and it is immaculate because you can even read the text on the walls. And it's going to be a permanent record of our museum as it is. And when our building is completely pulled down, this is a permanent record. So this can be explored through a guided method, through education, or it can just be for people who are interested to visit the museum for their own reasons, and they can make their way through. And there are those different points you can see where you can, a video will come up and it's been edited so that it's short and sharp, but containing very concise information. And there's Moshe Fishman, who passed away last year, and it's a real memory box as well for so many reasons. Other things that we've been doing to keep our community connected beyond, our core audience being the school students. We've been doing things like representing past lectures by eminent scholars, and then a few days later hosting a Q&A and discussion session for our volunteer guides, and that's part of their professional development, and they of course miss coming in as well. And something I did, which was recently, I held an introductory session on how to care for your family archives, so giving people practical advice. They've got time at home to look through their collection of family photos or other historical objects, and often people don't know where to start or what to do. So it was giving people really practical, easy advice on, how to get started, how to motivate yourself to get started, how to look after the objects in a physical way, how to digitize them, and how to start telling the stories from your family. So what we're trying to do is to keep in touch with our community on all levels, and also make ourselves available on an online presence through social media, and as well as, picking up the phone and speaking, to people. I speak to my own volunteers from archives constantly, or we send messages to each other just to stay in touch and make sure that everyone feels that they're still part of this very, very strong community.
Thanks, Anna. And I think what you touched on there about the virtual tour becoming an archive of the historical exhibition, what will be soon your historical exhibition space. It's really interesting, and it's perhaps one of the things I've always felt is quite sad is we often don't archive museum experiences. We can archive the boards, we can put them somewhere, we can get pictures of them, but actually these virtual tours give us a way of going to the same museum as it was kind of 5-10 years apart, always through the ages, and seeing how museum narratives evolve, and then thinking of, as a researcher, I find that incredibly interesting to see the incremental changes and what happens through the ages. And also with the Family Archives Project, I know we spoke about this briefly a few weeks ago. It seems to, I think it's interesting, again, we think about the digital, we think about the non-material, we go online, we are, everyone thinks unembodied and we can't touch things, but actually it can be a really powerful way to bring people together to do physical things in their home, and have lots of different people doing these. Thank you for sharing that. Stephen, could we go next?
Yeah, so actually it's very interesting because we've had to rethink some programs, and that's helped us to rethink our strategy overall. For example, we are the education partner for the amazing program that Mona Golombek does called The Children of Willesden Lane. As you might know, she goes and she performs to these massive audiences of young people. And the 5-year program that we're working with her was going into a city, doing the presentation to 10,000 young people, and then reaching the rest of the school district through a variety of digital and in-person programs. Obviously, that's changed. So we had to sit down with her and say, so now how do you perform to young people when you can't perform to young people, when the whole experience was about being immersed in the theatre experience? So we're busy rethinking that right now in terms of all of the options that are available digitally. So I think that applies to everything. And what's come out of this actually is pivoting our strategic plan to be focused on a sort of a tentpole digital strategies division, and literally refocusing things so that all the folks that are involved in the Shoah Foundation's digital platforms, which are in each department, actually then form a single strategy that goes through the whole organization. I'm sure we're going to return to some form of personal connection, but I think it's important for us to orientate that way. Somebody's asking a question about what does the landscape look like for collecting survivor testimonies. Actually, we're going to be ramping up. We've developed a remote interview system. We don't anticipate we're going to be going into 95-year-old people's homes anytime soon. So in fact, as of July, we will be interviewing every single week with multiple interviews and ensuring that those testimonies can be collected remotely and that they get the chance to give those stories, because in some senses this particular crisis has increased the urgency for people to tell their stories because you know, of the obvious consequences of COVID for those who are elderly. So a lot's going to change. It's building on what we've already done, but it's refocusing our efforts around our digital strategies. And by the way, I'll just add one thing to that. Audios are not going down. We're getting 450,000 minutes of YouTube viewing every day at the moment. So, you know, it's a lot of content that's being consumed, and audience numbers are not down, they're up.
Fantastic, Stephen. Okay, can we move on to Marc, and then we'll have Heather, and then we'll move on to some of the Q&A.
Well, Stephen's audiences are going up, unsurprisingly. Got less to do. I think our role is to make our content more meaningful and not to pollute the airwaves. I think for us, what we discovered because of that is that actually, no matter how brilliant, you know, we have cinematic, inspirational content. It doesn't really work in the same way online. So bin it and go with commemoration and learning, which is transaction. In other words, that it's about the exchange of human stories, not just me telling it you and you don't get a chance to respond. So I had two forms this year. One was our family Seder night, which I thought was going to be dreadful, and it was incredible. And then the experience of for those on this call who aren't Jewish, when you lose somebody and the opportunity to sit shiva, say prayers for them, that was a terrible thing. So the good thing was we did Seder night for the first time to start Passover in 5 time zones: LA, New York, London, Cape Town. 4. Sue me, there's only 4. We'd never done that before, and the quality of the experience was unlike anything we'd ever done, and it was incredibly meaningful. And you're talking about a diaspora of Jews and an exodus situation, to relive that across boundaries. So I thought, you know, this doesn't have to be epic in production values necessarily to create an experience that has real meaning for the times we're in. The bad side of it was the United Synagogue, which I'm a member of in the UK, decided that you cannot hold this shiva process. You cannot say Kaddish for people, memorial prayers for someone you've lost online, even if you've got the minimum quorum, the minyan of 10 people. Now, my creative partners lost his dad to COVID-19, and he wasn't allowed to say Kaddish online with 1 million people online. He's absolutely outraged. There's been stuff in the Jewish media about that. And you go, the word, to go back to your earlier questions, the word commemoration we use a lot. It's not memoration, it's commemoration, remembering things and people with other people. So for me, the synagogue authorities, the Beth Din, whoever, were out of order in not adapting to the times we're in. It's meant to be about human beings and the value and meaning that they derive. So the learning for me is, I'm all about epic storytelling. You can't be epic in an online environment. You have to really be warm and empathetic and more human-led than you could ever possibly imagine it might be. And I don't think it'll go away post-lockdown. I think some of this stuff we're going to want to continue. We might even ditch some of our physical programs and do some of it online, because if it allows you to share and have a richer experience. The last example I'll leave you with is, and a couple of you have mentioned it, that Together We Remember organisation. We took part in that as well. And our theme was the power of music, not just to remember, but to really activate people, unite and activate people. So we had Stephen's brother James, who's Stephen's co-founder of the National Holocaust Museum in the UK, but who also founded Aegis with Stephen, the Rwandan Genocide Trust, Kigali. And we had a survivor of the Holocaust, for whom we made a hip-hop Holocaust video with a rapper, being interviewed alongside a guy who lost family in the Rwandan genocide, who had also made an animated music-themed video. Very, very different styles, but the ability to compare each other's stories, and the fact that both of them had chosen a similar kind of creative device to tell that story, and then to invite a live violinist at the end of the program to accompany the memorial candle lighting across, again, I don't know how many time zones, umpteen, was a beautiful thing. We were going to try and do something more ambitious and have a live musical orchestral performance across all the different tiles on the Zoom slot, but that was, you can't, there's a time lag, so we couldn't do that. So it was just one violinist playing, but everyone lighting their candles together, almost as a kind of to draw to a close this beautiful exchange of storytelling through music. We'd never have thought of that had we not been in lockdown.
Thanks, Mark. I think it's interesting, again, we don't need to have these high production values for something that can be actually quite powerful in Zoom conversations. Obviously, there are examples when it doesn't always work. And it was a concern in universities. How do we do our high quality education resources our own amidst a strike in the UK as well, suddenly online as like the newest, best high-tech online courses where you can't. And actually, perhaps we don't always need that. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we all like to see big epic films, and other times just human contact in one way or another is powerful. We're going to pass over to Hebe in a second just to answer this question. I'm also just sending the panelists some of the questions that have come through in the chat, so you can have a look at them, and then perhaps we can just try and answer those in one go afterwards. So Hebe, if you can talk about some of the lessons that your team has learned for the future.
Okay, so I think that for us, what was very important when we went into the sudden lockdown was to re-strategize and to rethink about what are we doing, who do we want to speak to, what is important. And while we started with webinars, we found that eventually we were embroiled with so many other people doing webinars that what was the point? Unless you've got something that is really different and that is really special that sticks out. And we came back to the point that our core function is an educational function as far as learners are concerned. Now, in South Africa, the Holocaust is part of the curriculum. So in grade 9, students learn about the Holocaust and human rights, etc. And in grade 11, the history students learn about eugenics and pseudoscience. And we have a very large portion of our population who don't have data, don't have smartphones, don't have access to computers. And we thought, well, how do we reach these learners, and what do we do for them that assists them in continuing with the curriculum and aids the teachers? And so we decided to start, and it was quite difficult being in lockdown and all of us sitting in our own homes, was to start recording lessons in units of 15 minutes each with a PowerPoint presentation that we could actually send out on WhatsApp. And it was really trial and error. How do we make sure that we get all of the content into it? And we have an amazing director of education, Linda Hettner, who sat for many days going through how do we tell the story in the 15 minutes. And so we've covered the grade 11 eugenics and pseudoscience in video format. We're now creating resources which the education department prints and will deliver to food centers within the different townships. They feed about 560 learners every single week, twice a week, and they use the food center as the drop-off point for resources. So that's where our focus has been now, is how do we create the resources for the learners? How do we put it online that it's accessible online? How do we make it accessible that an educator or the department can actually print out in a short version to deliver to the learners? And the other beauty is, because we've got 3 centers around the country, is that each center doesn't have to redevelop. So where we take responsibility for developing one thing, another center will start taking responsibility for developing something else, so that we can share the resources. I think the biggest challenge that has been for us as individuals and as a center is that, other than myself, who comes from this kind of background, all of our team had to learn how to navigate their way through a digital platform and different ways of working. And I want to tell you something, they have been unbelievable, in that they've really pushed their buttons to try and learn and to contribute as much as they possibly can, and have become very creative, and probably have realized that there's a creative side that they didn't know. Will it replace what we do as a center? No. I think that, please God, when we get to a stage where we will be able to have a center, we will not, probably for the next 2 years, be able, 18 months, be able to go back to the center as we know it. But I think that it will be a tool that we will be able to reach out to learners who are far away from the center, who would never have the experience of going to a Holocaust center, or of educators being able to teach that part of the curriculum by using the resources that we created. I think that we have to look at this time as being a time of opportunity, and how do we use these opportunities, and how do we develop and grow in a different way.